Before I start here today, I want to come in to the edge of our owl's face, and this is all fluffy. We've got these white fluffy edges here, and to put this in I'm going to use my dip pen. I want everything to be fine and just floofy, and I won't be able to get such a good effect if I were to use a brush. Coming into my masking fluid and using it directly, I intend to put some fluff on the edge of his face and here down the beak so that we can get this lovely soft effect. To make sure that I don't inadvertently come in with my background colour and smudge it across behind that line of feathers, the line of masking fluid here and here, I'm going to come in behind it and just drop in some masking fluid behind so that that will keep it clean too. To do that, just take a nice brush, wet it and soap it. You're soaping it to keep the brush safe from the masking fluid. Otherwise, you'll find that the masking fluid will destroy your brush. It'll stick in the hairs of the brush and then you won't be able to use it for other projects. Now, if you want further information about anything to do with masking fluid, go and have a little look at my video here. Now I'm soaped up, I'm going to take a bit of the mask and come in just behind. And I'm dropping it just up to the mark where the masking fluid starts to come out of the body, where it leaves and goes out into the air, into the background. So I'm just going to do a little bit of this. Don't make it a straight line, because if you do inadvertently go over it, it'll look most peculiar. So make it a wiggly woggly line. And I'm coming all the way down this front, and I'm going to come in here behind the beak area and do some in here as well. and that just keeps us safe and stops this dark colour going up into something that we want to be lighter. I did a little bit just down this front too here, just down here. So we'll just add a little bit behind there too. Now interestingly enough, because we've used the soap, if you do get bubbles in the masking fluid from the soap, just go back and just burst them. Because if you don't, the paint will burst the bubbles, and then it goes through the bubbles because it leaves a round mark, and then you find you get these dots of paint in the masking fluid, and you'll think that you haven't used it properly, but you have. My brush now can go in the water and be rinsed, and if I give it a wipe on my cloth, I'll find that it's beautifully clean. It's lovely. It's just as it was. Once that's dry, we can start on our background, and I know I want that to be lovely and dark and have plenty of depth, so that the light golden colours that we're going to use on our bird will really show up. I can use a touch of the blue and a touch of the black together, the Payne's Grey, and I'm going to have this on standby. This is my Schminky, the gold powder, so that I can sprinkle some in when I'm done. The first thing we need to do realistically is just dampen it down, and the reason for this is because it will save it from drying too quickly, and then I won't be able to get the paint on there fast enough, and I'll land up with stripes and marks and darker areas and all sorts of mishaps. So if I just dampen it down, it's shiny but it's not runny. Don't want it to be runny. And I want to use the Payne's Grey up in the corners where I want it to be nice and dark. And you'll notice with this paper that you get texture in it when you're painting. You can see there how textured it is. A bit of dark up in this corner here. And then if you'd like to just drop a little bit of the blue onto your brush as well, that will give you a bit of interest here in the background. We need to be really dark behind all this floof that we've just painted in, because the light will show up against the dark, so we know we need to be dark in there. And I want to be really dark down in this corner here. It's good practice to make your corners darker than the rest of the painting. So if I pull that all up through here, and what I want to do now is just come in there and I'm going to offer up the tiniest bit of salt. I don't want a lot because I don't want it to distract us. So this is just table salt. And imagine that you're going to put on as much as you would put on your dinner. So in this corner down here, a little bit down the edge. Look after your heart, look after your health. Don't use too much salt because it can just obliterate everything. It takes so much colour out that you land up not being able to see what you've actually painted. So if I get rid of that, I'm now going to come into my gold. Now, two things I can do with this. Either use the end of a paintbrush and have a little dig into that and sprinkle some on, which gives you quite a nice effect. Look at that. But if you're not sure about that, you want more, go in and just use one of these. This is a paint spatula, and you can dig into this and you can sprinkle with that. I'm going to put this, the end of my paintbrush, into my water because that will give me a bit of a sheen on the water, and it means that as I'm painting that will transfer to the picture, which will be quite nice. It might give me a little bit of a ka-ching. But for now I'm going to wait and see what the salt does. Let's see. If at any stage you decide that this has worked enough, that the salt has given you the kind of effect that you want to see, I didn't want it to be any bigger than this. I think it would have been too intrusive. And if you think that you've got enough, you don't need any more, stop it. Just put a hairdryer on it and it'll just negate anything else, any further action. It will dry it and then it will remain as it is. You can see it's worked quite nicely. Leave your salt on until you're finished and we'll remove it later. I don't want to disturb any of that at the moment in case anything might be a little bit damp. That could give me grief. The next area I want to deal with is this up here, his forehead. And I'd like to keep this quite light so that we've got the light against the dark. This is the whole point of the picture, these two beautiful colours together, this yellow and the blue. And this, I'm going to make it dark, but I will want to curve it down and round towards his beak because you've got this curve on the forehead. And to do that, I'm just going to make this a little bit darker down here. And so I shall add a teeny touch of the blue into this as I paint. And we've got to hope that it doesn't go too green. We're just going to have to try it and see what happens. But what I would like to use in addition is this cling film. And I'll prepare it. Let's have a piece ready and waiting, because I don't think I'll have the time to panic and get it ready. And I'm going to scrunch it all up so that I've got marks in it so that it will crease. And these hopefully will become the feathers on his forehead, these marks that I have made. There we are, we're ready with that. Just put that there and it's ready to go. Incidentally, when you're buying cling film, buy the cheap ones, because if you buy the good value, the dearer ones, you'll find they're a bit thicker and they won't work quite as well. So a really nice thin cheap cling film is ideal for this. Going into my number 8 brush, this size here, I don't want it to be this huge brush anymore. I'm going down a brush size, and I will wet this area that I want to deal with. Go beyond it. Don't just wet that, go beyond it in this instance, so that if anything does run over, it isn't the end of the world and we won't land up with hard lines. Around the edges of your work, you'll notice that it always dries more quickly, and that's because this tape is paper and it's sucking out the moisture as well. So just make sure maybe that you give that a little bit of extra up there. Again, shiny but not dripping wet. I don't want it dripping. And the yellow, this sunshine yellow, look at, oh, gorgeous colour. Absolutely love it. I am going to just throw it on. I don't care if it goes over, it doesn't matter. But what we do need to do, I'm going to lighten this a little bit here. So just using a clean brush, clean it, dab dab to get rid of any extra liquid, and just lighten that edge. And then I'm going to take a little bit of the blue, just the tip of the brush, and from here, don't go right down to the edge, but from here, just lift some of that into there, bring it up as you work, like that. I'm just getting rid of extras here. I haven't cleaned it, but I've just wicked any moisture off. And I don't like these blobs on the end of these brush strokes. So get hold of them and just push them back. Don't keep pulling them out, push them back. And then I can clean and ever so gently go into the burnt umber. Only want a tad, and I'm going to come in too much. And this time I'm going to pull that up just through this bottom area here. And that should give me that curve down his forehead. A little bit more of that burnt umber is going to come along here, because then that will give me a bit of shadow as that curves over here. A bit of blue. I'm just playing it by ear as I work. So that I haven't painted this before, I haven't practiced it. This is what we're getting. And now I'm going to use this is my cling film, and I'm going to put it on there and I'm going to scrunch it. So scrunch, mark, scrunch, push. I want all these lines in it, because these lines are going to be wonderful things that are going to give me my effective feathers. You can lift off if you want to, if you're not happy with what you've got in any place, and go back in. And you can do that for as long as it's wet. But as soon as it starts to dry, leave it alone and come away. I'm just going to press it down. Scrunch it in a little bit more here. And then I'm just going to walk away and leave it until it's dry. And I'll show you in a minute how you know that it's dry. Whilst that's drying, I'm going to come down here and work on this area down here. These feathers are heading downwards. They're all coming towards me. And they're a mixture of very dark and the light sploshes on them. Get all these technical terms here, you know. And this is his ruff around under his beak, and this will be very dark up under here. So we've got to take that into account in here. I'll use the cling film again, but this time I haven't screwed it up because I want to use this in a directional way to get the idea of the feathers coming downwards. Let's wet this again. I'll come in here and I'm going to wet the whole area. I shall come over the edge of the ruff and bring the wet all the way down and round. And once again I can see this soaking water up along this edge, so more water down and around here. Don't worry if this edge blurs and runs, it doesn't matter because that will just give it distance, it's fine, doesn't matter. But the first thing we need to do is get the yellow in here, because the yellow, I want that to shine and stay clean. I'm just going to come light against dark here on this edge. Always light against dark. There we are. So these are the lighter marks on the feathers. I need to make sure this is dark under here. First thing I'm going to do is go in here with the phthalo blue and drop some of that in. Just drop it in. It's all quite wet and mobile. Don't worry about brush marks, because brush marks will mean nothing. They will all disappear when we get the cling film out. And then this is the Prussian blue, and this is why I wanted this real dark, because I'm going in there with that. Now can you see the way that that Prussian blue is pushing the other colour away? It's amazing. I put the Prussian onto the paint and it pushes everything else away. And if you know that your paint does that, it can have some real benefits. So I'm going to put that in there like this. And then I know that I want this real dark under the ruff. So that is going to be the Payne's Grey. So that's coming in under here. A bit more water. Pull that down under that ruff here. And I want some down in this corner. Again, because it's a good move to have darkness in your corners. This is a bit too sloppy. So clean it, dry it. And I'm going to come in here and just lift a little bit so that it bleeds and I don't have a hard line. There you go. So that would be easier to deal with now. See the way that's crept up there? And then if I take this, I'm going to use this and I'm going to pull it, pull the whole thing so that I get lines. I want lines. And that will give me this downward drag. I need a little bit more. There we go. And that should give us the idea of feathers coming down this way. And now we wait and we see what happens. Well, that's had time to dry, and now the big question is, how do we know that that is ready to come away, the cling film? How do we know? What gives us the clue? Let me show you. Little tip here. If we come in tight and have a look, you can see through the cling film that this here looks grainy, it looks speckled, and that's exactly what we're after, because when we take the cling film away, there you go, this is the effect we're looking for. The next thing I want to do is to remove this masking fluid down the side here. So I'm going to use this lovely little bit of kit. This is called a mask away, and it's just like that kind of crepe sole that we used to have on our shoes when we were kids with our sandals. You can buy these either from my website or from the SAA, and if we come in here and we just rub, no sore fingers, you're not putting oil and dirt on the page with mucky fingers, and it just takes it all away so easily. And again, rather than lots of little bits that all land up on your carpet, here we go, I've got just this lump that I can take off and I can throw away. I'm going to put it in my water for now, but look at that, and that's given us a really nice edge along there, so that will do very nicely, thank you very much. So that's the mask away. The next thing I'd like to do is paint the eye. Now it's strange because I have arguments with a particular girlfriend or two about this. We can't agree about doing the eye now or doing it later. Some of my friends like to paint the eye and it's the very last thing that they do, so that suddenly the whole thing kind of comes together and you can see this creature or person looking back at you. Personally, I like to paint it right now, so that if I get it wrong, I know that I can just discard the whole painting before I put too much effort into it, or I can create my eye, and sometimes just the lift of an eyebrow or a little bit of a frown, and it changes the whole feel of the painting. So I'd like to know right now. I want to come in here and I intend to use my lovely golden yellow for this. I'm going to just lift out a nice brush full of paint, and using a number 4, I want to come in here and paint it in good and solidly in this gold. Around under this part of the eye here, I want to just drop it in. Not too fussed about the pupil and going over the pupil at this present moment in time, because he is going to have like eyeliner around his eyes, and that won't hinder me if it's going to be black, will it? It won't matter. I've left that gap because now water, and I want to come through just with water so that the bottom part of that eye is lovely and pale. And then come up through here, lift a little bit more out if we feel that we need a lighter area. And I'm now thinking that I'd like this to be a bit darker and a bit more exciting up here. Find yourself a red, just find a red that you have in your palette from something else. So I've got this here, and this is my bits and pieces palette of odds and ends, and this is alizarin crimson. And all I'm going to do is drop it in right now whilst it's still here on my brush, and this is all still a bit damp. So I'm going to just come in here. And you're going to manipulate the paint now. You're going to be the boss of it. So I've rinsed and I've now just got a damp brush, and I'm going to manoeuvre that until I'm happy with what I've got there. So it's just damp. I've cleaned it, but it's damp. Pull it down. I've got these horrible marks here. Don't worry. Clean it again. Dab it till you've got rid of the water. And then I'm going to just do that. Dig into it. Poke into it like that. And then I'd like to get that dry. The odds and ends have gone away, we don't need them anymore, but what I would like to do is just come in with a little bit of Payne's Grey now and it's dry. This is dry, and I just want to put a teeny bit of shadow up here, so drop that in, a little bit of Payne's grey like that, clean it, dab dab, and then again gently poke into the colour like that, clean it, dab dab, and come in and poke like that, so that you have this darker shadow up under the eye ridge. Now I don't think that's dark enough there, so I'm just going to pull that down a little more, and then dab dab again, and then come in and gently do that. Alright, so as long as we don't fluffy brush it, so fluffy brushing is going back and back and back and back and back, don't do it, please don't do it, and let's dry that, and then we'll go from there and see if we need to put any more in. We've got really large eyes here, so I'm thinking to myself, and I can afford to go to town a bit on this, so I'm going to take my red alizarin and I'm going to run it all the way around the pupil like that, rinse, dab dab, and then come from outside of the colour and just smoosh it, stroke it. Don't bully it, just stroke it. That's it. Just so that you can get that darker colour in around there. Our next move is to come in and put in this pupil, and I want that to be as black as black as black can be, solid black. So here we go with the Payne's grey, but we need a highlight there as well. We do have to think about putting a highlight in. I'll reserve the white. Therefore, come in, take a good brush full of Payne's grey, still with a number 4, and I really want it to be single cream thickness, the paint. Just get rid of that drip of water off the ferrule, because that will run down and make a mess. And the outer edge of this pupil has got to be the most perfect circle. So if you possibly can, try and get that beautifully rounded. There's no edges, no oddities, it's just completely and beautifully rounded. That'll do. I'll fill it in, but I know that through here I'd like a nice slither. I'm not going to do anything that's perfectly shaped, a dot. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to do something like that to give the impression that there's maybe a reflection from something somewhere. Make sure we're beautifully black, so we can leave a highlight like that, and we can also clean the brush, dry the brush tissue, and then come in and somewhere else, doesn't matter where to be honest with you, because we don't know where the highlights are, you can also with a thirsty brush lift a little bit out. So you can do some of that as well. There's 2 ways there of putting a highlight in, and you can rest assured that if you don't like one or the other, using your paint as thickly as this, it really doesn't matter, because you can always go back in and you can soften it, you can obliterate it, you can just cover it over with black again. This one here, I'm going to just pick up a little bit of the grey. I'm going to put a grey shadow through it, as though there is a reflection there somewhere. But it makes your eyes look more interesting. This is what you're after. You want it to look interesting. I'm looking at this and I don't like this hard edge. It's dry now, so I want to come in there. I'm just going to soften that somewhat. Pull it down. And then I'm going to make that under the eye, under the eyelid here, even darker. Because I eventually want to have some white floofy fur there for his eyebrows, and the only way that's going to show up with a white gouache is if I make it dark underneath. So I'm just going to soften that. That should do it. That'll do. That'll do. Eyes done as far as I'm concerned for the moment. We might go back, we may not. We'll see how we go with it. While we're in the area, let's look at this next, this area here. I want to come up to the beak, and the fur, the fluffy feathers that are behind this beak will be in shadow here. We'll need some depth in this area. And we will also need to address some colour to this, because this area here is behind his forehead. Going back to my number 8, what I'll do this time, 2 things here. I want to mix a browny yellow, so I'm taking my yellow, and into that I'd like to add just a little bit of burnt umber, so that I have this really rather nice orangey ochre colour. And we'll use that down the side of his face here to give us some shadow, a bit more brown I think. Let's just give that a try. That's more like it, this lovely kind of orangey brown. Now I've got the colour on the brush, so let's go for it and let's use it. I want to come all round here, and I'm tucking that in tight to his forehead up through here. And then I'm just going to dib and dab and dob it like that. Rinse, dab dab on my cloth, and I'm coming in this time like this. That will become easier, but that's given me that lovely area of depth there, but I've still got the white furry feathers that are coming out into my background. So happy with that completely. Whilst I'm there, I'm also going to take my Payne's Grey, and whilst this is still wet so that it can bleed if it wants to, I'm happy. I'm going to put the Payne's Grey behind the beak here, and I just need some shadow in this area here, so pop it in, rinse, dab dab, and then again come in this way to bleed that away as well. Soften that there. And what you can do if you want to is get hold of some of that and pull it out so that it becomes floof. Can you see what I've done there? I've just gotten hold of the colour and pulled some of it out so that it becomes floof in that area behind the beak. Whilst we're dealing with the grey, the other area that needs a little bit of shadow is here under the beak, because the beak is casting shadow on this bit of floof under his chin, the white floof under his chin. Therefore, if I come in again to the grey, Payne's Grey, good old Payne's Grey, and I want to drop that in there in this kind of triangular shape, and then with a damp brush come in quickly, soften one edge, clean it, damp, come in on the other side like this, and then I'm going to do exactly the same and pull some of this out so that it gives me that fluffy area. And I'm going to do the same here, but I'm going to pull it the other way because this is negative painting. We're talking about the shadows underneath the feathers now. So we're not painting the feathers, we're painting the shadows that are underneath the feathers. So that'll do, you don't need to do any more than that. We just wanted that bit of grey in there. It's quite important to have it. We're jumping about because I don't want to go near anything that's wet. I need to address different areas and do them piecemeal so that nothing's going to interfere with anything else. If we open this up a little bit so that we can see what we're doing, I'd like to come up here and deal with this area here. I'm not going to be realistic with this. I don't want browns and golds, and I'm going to go into this with blues and blacks and really kick some colour into it. First thing we're going to do take our number 8 brush, and I want to be looking at all of this around the eye here. And I'd like to really be thinking about using, as I say, some blues and some black up here. And I'll want to be using some black underneath his feathers here, for instance. We need to really put some contrasts in here. And the best way to go about all of this is now to think about wetting some of it. Let's start up here. He has got a little white kind of eyebrow over here, but I can put that in if I need to later on with some gouache mixed with colours. I'm not concerned about that either particularly. It's this, all of this, I want to get something in here. Start off with the lighter colour because I don't want to be throwing the darks in first and dirtying my water and my paints. And all around here I'm intending to come in with my phthalo blue. So let's get this mixed up to the kind of colour and level that I want it. I want to really enjoy this gorgeous phthalo blue. Coming in here, I'm avoiding some of the eye because I know that some of that's going to be painted. I need to stop there somewhere because this will be the white fluff. So when that happens, rinse, just get rid of the excess and then come back up here and come from outside of the paint and kind of push it back. And let the paint do the work. Look how that's bleeding. This colour's very good for sort of rushing in to fill a gap. And that's a good thing because if we know it does it, it gives us some very good effects. Here's the dark that's here underneath this is his ear. So up here, this is really dark. And that will come down here to come around his eye in a minute. There's also shadow around his eye here. So I'm mixing some of that. I've got Payne's grey on the brush. I'm going straight into this Prussian blue. I'm being a terrible messy person. But I want to put some shadow around his eye like this. And then I'm going to introduce this colour down here into this here. There's some shadow around his eye here, and that comes up under his beak, so back into the Payne's grey and under the beak, water, under here, under his forehead, and down round here we have this shadow, and I'm going to come in there with a damp brush and again just interfere with it like this. Rinse and dab, and then I'm pulling that out again so that we've got the floof feathers here that will eventually come across his nose. Like this. So I'm just pulling the brush. Make sure you've got the brush with a nice tip on it like this so that you can pull your paint and you can make the marks that you want to make. Once we've done that, I'm going to put this down. I may as well do this now because it's still all wet and mobile, and come into the Payne's grey, and again I want it single cream consistency, and I'm going to paint this around his eye. So you need a nice steady hand. If you're not sure about this, don't do it. Wait until it's dry. Don't do it and mess it up because you'll spit. So up and around, nice rounded line. No angles, no corners, no wonky bits if you can avoid it. That's solidly black in there. And just for good measure, pull it out. Do this flicking thing here as well. And it will just make it look like fluff. That's it. A little bit into the blue here. Any texture you can get into this, it's going to make it look fluffy. You don't want him to look hideously fluffy, but we do want him to look as though he's got some fluff, don't we? That's really paramount. Whilst we're here, let's address the ear problem. The ears are this really rather gorgeous golden brown. So up through here, and some of them are a bit floofy again. Like this. And then you've got solid Payne's grey up through here, using the whole of the brush there. And these feathers have got little lines across them in places like this. So if we can do that, that would be nice too. We've got another ear up here that we need to address. So this one's same kind of treatment. We've got the lovely golden colour up somewhere through here. And I'm not being totally accurate, I don't care. I know that sounds blasphemous, but I don't care. I just want to get an impression of an owl. I'm not painting a realistic owl, that's not what I want to do. It's not what I'm trying to do here at all. I want colour. That's solidly black there. And then so is this. Put it in there. Now, here we could have a bit of an issue because we've got dark against dark. So for me, if that was me, I wouldn't do that. I'm going to come in with the yellow and I'm going to pop the yellow down that outer edge there so that I've got light against dark, dark against light. That's my plan. You've got to have a plan, you know. Fiendish and cunning it may be, but it doesn't matter as long as you have a plan. Now, whilst all that's drying and doing its thing up there and mixing and melding and doing all that kind of stuff, let's come down here and look at this. This is vibrant. This is exciting. This is amazing, colour-wise. This is meh, isn't it? This. So what we're going to do is use the marks that we've got and add some extras. If I go back to my number 8 brush and I go back to the Payne's grey, I want to add some of these dark chest feathers to my bird. Choose the ones that you like here. Look at the shapes that you've got and fill them in. Fill in some of the gaps that you've got. Don't go over the lines that the cling film made. So we've got little lines down here. Don't obliterate them. Leave the lighter areas between like this so that you've still got the lighter area around the edge of a feather in inverted commas. Here, down to here. So I'm just using the shapes that I've got for a bit of texture here. Like that one, I'm going to use that. And there's a lovely one here, I think I'm going to use that too. A bit more water. So I'm using this paint really quite thickly. Don't be scared to do that. Single cream that lot really. There we go. Get some good coverage, and that gives the impression of these feathers under his neck ruffles. That's what we want. Let's get that clean and dry, and then I'm going to look at some of these areas in a little minute with the blues, but we're going to lay some blue on top of what we have rather than going in and making it all sort of bitty. Not going to do that. Let us do this beak now whilst we've got the masking fluid on here. It works for us, and then we can take the masking fluid off. The beak is just the Payne's grey, and I need to be aware that I really want to have the highlight down the front of this beak. This is going to be a lovely solid black, all of this in here. Let's start off, and we're working it as a jigsaw puzzle. We're doing the bits that we can do. good solid paint, so single cream again, and I'm coming up in amongst all of my little bits of masking fluid. And you see what I'm doing here? You can see the masking fluid. I'm going to do this part of the beak first. Okay. Oh, I love it when a plan comes together. Bring the dark colour right down. Nice sharp beak, and they're pointy. So let's not get carried away with ourselves. We need a pointy beak. Like this. Just enough water to manipulate it all. Up through here. Using it in almost emulsion thickness here. And then what I want to do with this area, clean it, dab dab to get rid of any excess water. And then I'm just going to use the brush to pull colour through. It's got to be very dark on the outer edge, so you might need to just drop in another little slither down there because it's dark against light. Got to be. And then I notice that there's just one or two little striations up the beak with the paint, like this, that you can see just here and there to give it that texture. And then we're going to allow that to dry and see what happens there. We've got to look at this area now where the little nostril is, and thinking all of the time about light against dark and dark against light. We come into this with our Payne's grey, and I want dark Payne's grey in this area here. But when I get down to this bottom, I'm going to leave a slither of light. There's my dark along here, so I want to be careful with that. Pulling this up and through. And then when I get to this top of the beak here, I want to just use a damp brush to pull the grey through. And it's textured when I look at it. When I look at my photograph, this is textured. So I'm just dibbing and dabbing and daubing with the brush to give myself the texture. One thing I do need to do is go back and lift some thick Payne's grey, because I want to make underneath that as dark as I can so that it stands out. Just going to soften that with a bit of water. And the little nostril that we're looking at here, the best thing you can do with that, again, is just pull the colour over it like this, because it needs to show up. And although it's a little hole in his beak, because the rest of it is so dark, we wouldn't get away with anything else here, because we couldn't make it dark enough against the depth of colour that we have already. So you just have to concentrate all of the time on dark against light, light against dark. That's dry now, and I've removed all of the masking fluid so we can see what we have, where we are with it, and what we've got to do next. This is fur that is coming up from his chest over the beak on the bottom, but of course it's never ever going to be bright white. So if I take a little bit of Payne's grey, thin Payne's grey, I'm just going to darken it off, because that would also be in shadow there. You wouldn't see that. You just get the hint of that bit of fluff and fur as it comes up onto his beak. That's done. And then the next thing I want to do is just soften some of this here. And we'll do that with a mixture of the Payne's grey and some of our lovely Tharlo blue, two colours together. And I want to use that quite thinly. So let's just try it first on a piece of paper. I want this sort of colour here, and maybe even a little bit thinner, a bit more water like this. And let's give this a go. And this will be the echoes of this fur that is coming out through here. Now we can do this, and then we're going to let it dry a little bit. And then with the side of the brush that's only just damp, keep it clean. Come in and soften it. You're just creating texture. You don't want too much there. Shadow and texture. If you're not sure about that, just try it first on a piece of paper and see how you can improve on it on your own skills. What I do need to do is darken some of this up here. And I'm going to do that with some of this sort of lovely orangey browny colour. But I need a bit of blue in it. If I take some of that and I bring it over and I put it into this grey mix, the grey-blue mix. Now here's something that's really important. I want to add more shadow down here. And I can do that. I could go in there and I could lay it in. Put it in and then I can blend it. I could also wet the whole area and then just drop it in. If you want to do that and you want it to be wet before you do it, you must be aware that you've got to wet the whole area, all of that lobe, because if you don't, you'll land up with a watermark. You can do it. So we can go in and come down from up here all the way down, no fluffy brushing so that nothing moves, nothing will move, and then I can use this colour to come in and darken that down there. Bit of blue even, I think I fancy a bit of blue in there, like that. And that will quite happily sit there on top. You should still, because I've used it thinly enough, be able to see the lines and marks that we've made underneath. That should be okay, but we haven't moved anything that's underneath. I'm just going to come round there with a damp brush and soften that edge, and that gives a much kinder shadow there, which looks as though that's curving around. We could also do just a little bit along here. So whilst it's all still wet, bring that colour up, pull it through to this area here. Bit of the blue. And it just gives him a bit more shape on that area there, doesn't it? That's better. I said to you I wanted some more blue down here. If you want to do that, that's absolutely fine. But again, you've got to go in, wet it, wet it, wet it. And just wet it to a stop point. So along one of the lines here would work fine. And I'm going to drop in blue over the top. Leave the yellow because I quite like that. That's it. Just wanted a bit more blue down there, that's all. Just a bit more blue. Now we've got to address all of this area. He's rough here. Got to do something with all of this, so we can do that next. Where are we going to go next? Next port of call is to deal with this ruff around his neck here. Just come in here and do something interesting here. And this is one of those occasions where we've all got brushes like this in our collection, and we all look at them sometimes and wonder what on earth we're going to do with them. Well, this is what we're going to do with them. We're going to use these for these beautiful sort of long neck feathers that we have here. And I want to mix up my paint first. My intention is to come in here and use the orange and the yellow, this sort of brownie mix and the yellow, and we're going to use the edge of the brush and we'll cut around here to give us this lovely shape. Let's just come into the yellow, so I want it to be relatively thick, and using the brush in the direction that these feathers travel, I want to come through here. I'm going to use this brush to cut these lovely shapes like this. If it won't sit over the top of the dark here, I don't care, I'm going to go in later and I can do that with some gouache, so that's okay. If you've got concerns about the beak, mask over it. You can mask over this, it's not a problem. Things that you've already painted you can indeed mask over. It's not the end of the world. But we're going to do that to start with. As I say, we'll come back to that because we're not going to be able to do that right at this very moment. To come up here around the beak, I can use the flat of the brush to fill the paint in, like that. And then we need to think about all of this round here as well. Now this is not going to cover any of that, so yikes, what do we do about that? Let me show you. For the next bit of this extravaganza, around his forehead, I want to use a thick paint that's going to be light and will show up. Now I can't do that if I'm going to use just a normal transparent watercolour paint. Therefore, I'm going to use gouache. So it's this stuff here. And it's great, but don't use it in your palette. There's some kind of chemical reaction occurs and this will mark your palette and you won't be able to get it off. Now, whether it's a ceramic or whether it's a plastic palette, it doesn't really matter. It will mark and it's just permanent and I don't like it. Therefore, I've got a real trick up my sleeve. Do you want to see what it is? Here we go. Something as simple as this. I've got a little pussycat who is absolutely mad keen on cat milk. Loves cat milk. Absolutely loves cat milk. And with something like this, I keep them, I use them, and then this goes in the bin. It's used once only and it works a treat. I don't need to worry about, because to be honest with you, if you try and reactivate this stuff, it's hopeless. It never comes back as good as it does the first time round. So I don't bother with it. I want to use my smaller flat brush now. And I'm going to take this goldeny brown and let's add that into some of this white gouache. I don't want to make it too pale because it's got to show up. So I may need to add some more colour. I can do that. I'm going to add some more yellow to it. And I'll add a bit more of the brown to it. Some water. And again, we're looking for single cream really. That's the kind of texture I want. Single cream. A bit more brown. I'll know the right colour when I see it. And this is what we're going to try and do this with. Let's see how it goes when I've stopped sticking my fingers in the paint. I want to come up here and these little feathers sit crosswise like this. And I can immediately see that I'm going to have to go into the forehead with a bit of darker paint here. That's all right. I'm using the flat of the brush, just using it flat. Like this. And then as we get to this area, they start to point upwards. this. Now it's not showing up, as you can see here particularly, so we'll need to address that issue, and that's easy enough. We'll go back into the brown. So let me pull some across rather than using the white brush in here. So if I come into this brown colour now, and I mix a bit more here with the white, I can use that and it should show up there. Yes, it does. A bit more. There we go. I also want to cut into this now with a bit of the phthalo blue, just to put some shadows and some low lights in it. Just like that. So it gives him a bit of a floofy ruff, and the same applies down here around the neck. So using the smaller brush, I'm going to come in and fill in where I've got white areas, just like this. Gives it a bit of drama, doesn't it? Around this side, I'm going to dip that into the water so that my colour is a bit thinner, and then pull it out with the lighter blue like this. That's it. Over in this area over here, where it wouldn't cover, go back to the white, add some yellow into the white, and then that will work quite nicely in this area. Now feathers are slightly different here because you're starting to get this kind of effect. So let's just do some of those, which is quite nice, isn't it? Gives us something different to look at and a different texture. And then looking up at this area here, what I'd like to do is come back into the forehead and using my blue and the flat brush, there are some lovely, lovely little striations on the feathers along here. So I'm just going to gently, there's some thicker areas like that. I don't want to do all of it because I also think that it's the easiest thing in the world to land up overworking something and putting too much of a pattern in. Don't do that. So I just want to give the impression that we've got these designs and patterns in here like this, but I don't want to go mad over it. Just gives it a little bit of texture rather than being this big area of light. There we go, that will do. Don't want to really do any more to that. The only thing I'm unsure about in the whole picture is the fact, two things really. I quite like the white floof, but I think that it is too much and it shouts. And I feel as well when I'm looking down here that I still don't have enough definite blue in this area, and I think what I'm going to do is just put a bit of a glaze on some areas. If I bring my big number 8 brush in to play and I pick up some of this phthalo blue, I'm literally going to just wipe it over some of the areas like this to bring this blue down into this area, because I just don't think there was enough here. We've still got the texture that we can see underneath with all of this lovely work that we did with our cling film, so that's fine, but I just want this blue down here. I want more of it. And I'm also considering just dumping, ooh, I don't know whether this is right or not. If you're not sure about something like this, take a photograph now, because then you have that photograph. So I'm going to do it right now. Click. That's it. I have this photograph now. If I suddenly decide I made a mistake, so I'm just going to come in here, drop in a bit of yellow, because that brings the yellow down into that very, very white area. That's better, isn't it? So again, damp brush, just blend, blend. Now, you know what I was saying to you about a watermark? There it is. Let me bring you in so you can see it. Here's the yellow watermark along here. So if I could do that, and that will soften it up a little bit, but I could still potentially have some here. I'm not too fussed, because what I want to do here is drop some gold in, so wait for it. We're going to have a bit of fun with that. Just wait for it. What I have missed and I want to include is his little eyebrow across here, and that really is quite white. So come back into the white with your flat brush. I'm not going to make it white, 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 white. It's just got a little bit of yellow in it there. I wasn't very happy about all the white there, so I just want to be a bit careful about this. And what I'm going to do is bring that through across there. And then again we have floofage. Floofage. It's like, I feel like Nigella Lawson and her microwave with her microwave. But there you go, there's the Hurst floofage, using the tip of the brush. Can you see what I'm doing? Can you see in that? Just over the eye, come in and add some little bits with a corner of the brush like that. Like that. Soften all that up. There we go. So he's got his little eyebrows. What you can do, if you'd like to, let's just make sure, won't you always, to rinse your brushes when you use the white gouache, because my goodness, it can sit in there and it can really, it's just like painting with emulsion. It can, really harden in your brushes. I have a damp brush now. It's just damp, not wet, not soaking. I'm just going to soften up some of that edge. Don't want it quite that hard. And a little bit of that edge too, like that. Under there maybe. Just damp, not wet wet. If you go in there very wet, you'll find that it will move too much and you won't be happy. I've been in his eyes and I've added, with some blue and white, just some extra highlights to see if you'd like it. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. You might want to just leave it as it was, but you can come in here and just use this bluey white mix. And I've added just a little bit of this yellow white here, so that it reflects back the colours of the bird. And something else we can do, if we want to give him some texture with his fur, this area here, You can either go in and spatter, and we'll do some of that as well I think in a minute because that's just fun to do, but I'm going to use this beautiful gold calligraphy ink here, and if I use my dip pen it gives me real control over the amount I'm delivering. I intend to come into this area here and just echo some of these dear little feathers. These lovely little floofy feathers. And I'm doing it with this pen because I know that I've got control with this. And we can do some out through here. And by twisting and turning them, it gives the impression that this is the way his face is formed. You see that that's curving and bending, which is quite nice. These up here would be heading this way. But by doing it with this type of pen and with this glittery paint, this lovely, lovely ink. Oh, there are some gorgeous inks around at the moment. Go and have a look at Cult pens. Oh, they've got some lovely stuff. It makes my mouth water. I've always loved nice stationery, always have done from a child. And to find such beautiful things available. The inks with glitter in. Oh, beautiful. There we go, we don't need a lot of that. But it just makes it more interesting. I could also use this if I wanted to come up here and to give him that on the beak, and we can go around this here, his little nostril. Around there. If there was anywhere else that you wanted it, you could think about that as well. Maybe bring some through down these dark feathers. It doesn't matter. I'm going to rinse that off. And then we're going to get creative, because this is another stage at which you might decide you want to photograph it, because we could come back in here and by doing what I'm going to do next, make a right mess of it. If you're in any doubt, don't do it. I want to come in here, and I intend to use my number 8 brush. I do not want to mess up this eye. Don't want anything in the eye. Therefore, it might be a really good plan to take some of my cling film, and I'm just going to put that over the eye like that so that I can't have a problem with anything. Can you imagine? I'd cry. I would cry. I want to take my decent sized brush, and I'm looking to have some of this Prussian blue, and I think the easiest way to do this is against another brush. Just bang it against the brush, and I want to spatter. I want some interesting effects on my bird. So that's the blue. Then how about to show up beautifully on some of the darker areas, we go into the gold, this lovely yellow, same gold but I mean the yellow, and I can spatter with that. because that will show up really nicely on some of these other areas. Some out in the sky, yellow particularly. And then of course, if you wanted to, you can dip into the gold. And we can introduce some gold into the equation as well. And there you have him, an owl sitting looking at you. All sorts of wonderful colours, but isn't it fun to not do it the conventional way, just to enjoy it and to love the colours. Hello again. I have been sitting down mulling this over, and I've come and gone during the course of the evening, and today is another day. I've been coming into the studio and having a look at it and thinking to myself, do I like it? What don't I like about it? And if I'm completely honest, I'm really unhappy with this area here. I think it does nothing. It just draws your eyes straight to it. And I think we need to address this and change it, do something with it. It's easy, as long as you think about it and take time, it's not the end of the world. It's too blank. I need something in here. The way the head's turned, to me, I think I should be able to see just a teeny bit of eye here. It would have been different if I hadn't got this here and this was narrower, but because I have so much of the floof there, I need to address this area here and take this white back. I also want to drop a little bit of white fur into this because I think this area is the expanse is too big, with not saying anything. And when I say not saying anything, I mean that it's not speaking to me when I look at it to understand what I'm seeing. Let's get over here first. What I want to do is imagine that this here is probably my owl's pupil. I will therefore come in with some Payne's Grey, and I just want to reinforce that. Just make sure it's very black so that we can see it. That's got to be dry before I do anything else. Having done that, we would now see a slither of gold through here. Let's see if this yellow is strong enough. I'm going to use it really thickly, almost like emulsion paint. Yes, that probably will do it for me. So already you can see that that's making more sense of the picture. When I look at that, I can see now that that is another eye, and it's over there. Oh, that's better, isn't it? My goodness. Just going a little bit wider on that. That's better. I'm going to dry that now as well. If that isn't showing up enough, the answer is to do what we did before. Take some white, some gloopy white, and mix a little tiny bit of yellow into it, and that will make it more opaque so that when we put that in there it really will show up. That's better again, isn't it? Okay, let's get it dry. Having done that, when we look at this owl and we look at animals like this, they have this beautiful kind of eye makeup on, where they have this eyeliner, cats particularly, and dogs, if you're like our Sky, she does too. Here she is. What do you think of this? That means I'm now going to come in here and pop in that black round there. Now immediately you can see that, and that makes one heck of a difference because we've got the other eye there, but we now need to complement it with this blue. And I need to take my gorgeous phthalo blue again. And this time I'm going to, where this is light, I'm going to come in here and introduce this dark blue. Leave the gap along the top of that beak like that. And then rinse, dab, dab, and come in from this side and just agitate it so that the paint runs and bleeds. But I want to keep the light edge because I need to have the light against the darkness of the background. Now immediately that's better, isn't it? There is no doubting that is better. We can take the white and pop a little highlight into the eye so that that gives that a bit of life. And then the other thing I'm thinking about that's really made me uncomfortable is this here. I think I'm too wide at this point. I got to realise that I can't bring in that background into here. I think it would make a mess. What I can do though is knock it back. So if I take the blue again and I bring it in here, leave a gap between the beak, and I'm going to put some blue in there, rinse and dab, and this time I blend from this side. And that makes that a lot more comfortable. Just dabbing the blue paint in there. And that's toned down the whole of that side, eased it off, made it a lot more interesting to read and to understand, and your eye doesn't go straight to that. That was worrying me. And it was because it was just white. But having said white, what I do want to do is bring a little bit of white around here. And to do that, we'll take our gouache and I'm just going to mix that until it's single cream. And get rid of all that excess. I don't want all of that. And I just want to come in here. And I'm just touching and skipping and titivating. Let me bring you in a little bit. And jumping about with it. And then some of this, because these are little feathers as well, they're coming this way. Make sure you've got plenty of white on your brush, because honestly, gouache is a monster really. It fades out so much as it dries. So just make sure that you have what you need on your brush. Otherwise we'll land up having to go back in again, which is really, really irritating. And then that becomes smaller and smaller as it comes up here and goes into the shadow. So all these tickling little hairs in here, just using the brush, not too wet. And I think, again, that looks a lot more comfortable. This here, I'm going to just bring a few little bits of white hair across here. Again, and all I'm doing here is just breaking up the darkness of this solid blue, because I'm feeling at the moment that it's just a little bit too much. There we are. That's better, isn't it? Just gives it a bit of texture. If we want to do a little bit of that round here as well, we can, but we've got to be very careful at this stage that what we're doing is actually adding to it and not fiddling with it, because we don't want to reach that stage where you put that last brush mark in and think, oh, I wish I hadn't done that. So if you're not sure what we're doing, don't do anything. Stop fiddling. But for now, I'm much happier with that, and I think I could rest easy now.